to the Action Podcast. Here's your host, my dad.
Well, welcome back to the XM Podcast. We are really shocked that each episode we put out, you continue to come back and listen. We just want to say thank you. Today, our guest is a dear friend of mine and someone I think very highly of. You will see we don't have any fun hanging out together, and that is total sarcasm. He has an unbelievable story that can only be explained through faith. Please welcome to the show one of my dearest friends, Ralph Bloom.
Ralph Bloom, I'm 44 years old, currently living with my roommates, or my parents, however you want to spin it. I work for a fantastic Christian-based company for one of the biggest brands in the world. It's red and white. You can put that together. I've got 3 kids, 26, 22, and 11. I enjoy everything to do with Cleveland sports. Unfortunately, that's been my life.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty active in my church. I'm active in Alcoholics Anonymous, which is where I find a lot of time and enjoyment of helping people. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of me in a nutshell right now.
So we'll just dive right in. You and I met each other in high school.
Yep.
And so it was my junior year that you transferred in. Is that correct?
Yep, junior year.
And you were quite the athlete, star in the baseball field. I was more of the kind that would ride the bench. That was more my role in cheering you on. But that's where you and I really kind of met and got to know each other. So, Ralph, allow our audience to get a little bit of your background. Let's talk about a little bit of your history and the way you were raised and kind of let's kind of give our audience a little idea of how we got here.
Okay. My parents still together. They've been married, I think, close to 50 years. We lived and grew up on the east side of Cleveland in a small community called Garfield Heights. They did everything they could to help me as far as morals and learning what's right and wrong. They put me in private school, to kind of get me out of the public school situation. They did the same thing for my sisters. I have 2 younger sisters. And when we were going to these private schools, the one thing that it was for me was just kind of like a reason to not be in the public school, right? Mm-hmm. And the reason I bring that up is because when you go to Catholic school, it's a little different than the religion and the relationship I have with Christ today. But played a lot of sports, did that, probably started playing baseball when I was 7, got into football when I was in the 6th grade, and that kind of became my muse. Everything that we did as a family revolved around athletics. Mm-hmm. And the reason I bring that part up is because the gifts that God has blessed me with were athletically inclined. Mm-hmm. Wasn't a very good student, but I knew if I produced on the field that I wouldn't have any consequences in the classroom or even outside of the classroom. So I really went hard at sports. Baseball has always been my love, but I was pretty decent at football too. So I started to just look at that to say, hey, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to idolize. This is what I want to be. And I was good at it. And, I took that athletic ability and it started to grow me as a person and where I was at mentally. I started to think I was better than. I started to think that, I didn't have to worry about how my grades were in school, and I really wasn't worried about the Catholic part of dealing with St. Peter and Paul School because that didn't have any interest to me. Yeah. Then I went to a private high school for a couple years before I, transferred to Hudson, and, I had one rule to stay there. I had to get good grades, and I didn't do it. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I wasn't a very good student. So when we transferred in as my junior year, I felt really, really out of place. Mm-hmm. I was coming from that little town on the east side of Cleveland into this big city that I thought was Hudson, a bunch of preppy kids like you, who didn't want anything to do with a street kid like me. And I still poured into the athletic part of my journey. Mm-hmm. And then ended up, starting as a quarterback as a junior there, beat the senior out. Same thing in baseball, got involved with the baseball team, met you, mm-hmm. Loved watching you play, especially our senior year, but in Purge, right?
Yeah, I played music. I wasn't playing sports.
Yeah. Purge was awesome. Downtown Akron, baby.
Thanks.
But yeah, like everything in my life revolved around athletics in that moment. Mm-hmm. because that's where I found my identity. And until I started to dabble with a few other extracurricular activities, that's all that mattered to me. And then I started our senior year is kind of when I started to take a different direction. After our last football game, that's kind of where I got into my drug and alcohol use, which became a huge part of my life. Because if you look back at even that little glimpse I gave you of Catholic grade school, a couple years of Catholic high school, my parents working their tail off to give me everything that I needed and almost everything I wanted, I never dabbled into that stuff because all I focused on, I wanted to be a professional baseball player. And I thought I could. And once I started to get involved in drinking and drugs, all that became kind of second to me. Weekend warrior, after that football game, started getting into smoking some dope, drank a bunch of beer every weekend. I'm still convinced that you did participate in some of those things, but you keep telling me you didn't.
Promise, I did not have a sip of alcohol until I was after 21. You can ask Josh.
I believe you, Josh, my dude. Hopefully he gets to listen to this. But yeah, Josh and I had some good times. But that just took something away from me that I never even had with athletics. Like I always came off, and I still do to this day, right? Like I'm wearing a neon yellow shirt for crying out loud, but loudest guy in the room, right? Biggest personality. And I was so afraid and insecure all at the same time, worried about what everybody was thinking about me. And, that's why I think performing on the athletic field for so long, bridged that gap and filled that hole in my soul, right? Like if I performed, I would get the love I was looking for. And if I didn't perform well, I would blame someone else, right? Because one, lesson that I learned early was that, if you're second, you're the first loser. And I never wanted to be a loser, never wanted to be a failure. And then when that kind of didn't fulfill me in that moment after that football game, I had to go find something that did. And when I found it, I chased it for a long time. Chased it for a long, long time. Went to college, played baseball in college, wanted to go D1, should have went D1. They didn't know how good I was, Matt. They told me I had to redshirt. I wasn't going to redshirt at a D1 school. So I went to a smaller Division II school, and that's where my addiction and my alcoholism kind of took off. Started drinking every day. At this point in my life, like I knew who God was. Like I wasn't having anything to do with him, right? Like even when I was in Catholic school, there was no relationship, but it switched from athletics being the center in my muse to alcohol and drug use. And every day I would go to class maybe once in a while. Still don't know how I got a 4-year degree, but come back from class, come back from practice, and then I would start drinking. And I did that for the entire time I was at school. Another little snippet that occurred during that 4-year span, told you about my kids. I had 2 kids at 20, my daughter 26, and my son 22. Got out of school, and I wanted to do 2 things because I wasn't going to play baseball anymore. I told you I wanted to be a professional athlete. That didn't happen because the drinking and the drugs kind of took over. I wanted to make a bunch of money, so I was going to go sell stuff legally, and then I was going to go party, work hard, play harder. And that's what I did. And I took my first hostage, is what I like to call her, because I was not a very good partner to her. And that's what I did. I'd go and do my thing and come and go as I pleased, and wasn't a very good father, wasn't a very good, eventually, husband, and my addiction just continued to take off. I left, I can't even tell you, man, like how many times I just left those 2 kids and her at home and went back to my roommate's house just because they were getting in the way of me doing what I wanted to do. Because by now it was full-blown addiction, man. Like I couldn't imagine not using one day, right? Like it was every day, all day, from the time I got up till the time I passed out. And I found, like, if you talk to other people that have addiction problems like I do, they talk about that first high that they never forget. Like I'll never forget that 140 a bush and that really bad weed out of a baseball bat pipe. And I was chasing that, like I said, for a long time. I found it. I found it in that opiate, and it was like, you ever see like a movie where the pearly gates open and there's a bunch of white lights, and it's like, oh, like that's how it felt. And then I started chasing that for a while. I chased that for another 10 years. And I tried to get sober a few times between the time I got sober now. Just didn't work because I never knew that I had to actually do this thing for myself. First time I wanted to do it to get my first wife off my back. The second time I did it because I wanted the family back that I had left, because she finally had enough. She said, dude, I'm not going to watch you die. Mm-hmm. Right? Kind of like what you said to me. You thought you were never going to see me again the last time you saw me when I was actively using. And then this time around, I had an epiphany. I call it my first God shot. And I woke up, came to one day, and rolled out of bed, and I was just crying and just asked God to help me. Like, I couldn't do this anymore. And it wasn't even about being sober, dude. It was about living that life. You know what I mean?
What do you think got you to that point where you wake up one morning and you're like, I mean, at this point, you've been doing this for years. Mm-hmm. I mean, this was a lifestyle, and this became part of who you were. What happened to get you to that point?
So I considered myself a high-class junkie, all right? And because, again, I'm from Hudson, man. I'm not going to say I'm a low-class junkie for crying out loud, right? But I consider myself a high-class junkie, and I was spending too much money every day on what I wanted. I was a pillhead, so I was spending $200, $300, $400 a day on pills, and I was running out of money, you know, and I knew what was coming. You know, I dabbled with heroin a few times. You know, I snorted. I never shot it, but that's where I was going, and that scared me. And again, I don't know if it was anything that I specifically did. I think God was like, all right, dude, like, it's time. Yeah, enough's enough, right? Like, and I had that moment of clarity in March of 2013, and I'm a slow learner, so it took me a couple weeks from the time when I got on my knees and asked him for help to actually start to seek it. Yeah. And I went to some drug and alcohol counselor, and she helped me out immensely. And then I got plugged into Alcoholics Anonymous. But it was the fact that I knew I was going to die, man. Like, there was no way around it. Like, it was either take me or do something to help me. Yeah. Like, that's where I was at. Like, I hit a spot where I didn't care about anything, including myself. And I was convinced I was going to die an alcoholic or addict death. Yeah. And again, he reached his hand down and he grabbed me, and I held on. So, Ralph, talk to me a little bit about going back to that high school kid that was just so focused into sports. And then after that football season, what do you think started, I don't know, to kind of shift that focus? What happened that the addiction, the precipice of that addiction kind of started in that time? And you may not know the answer to that, but what are some of your thoughts? If there's a young kid listening right now and just going, you know, it's okay to drink on the weekends, and I'm, 17 years old. Just give me a little bit of insight into that version of you. Yeah, because that's what I thought. I was just doing what high school kids do. But the reason I went and sought it, at least for me, was because I had a whole bunch of things built up from the time I was a little kid till that moment, right? That moment of failure, for whatever reason, was the moment that took me over the edge. Like, I had a bunch of emotion. I had a bunch of things going on in my head, and I didn't know what to do with it. Because back in the day, like, we didn't talk about anything. Like, none of this existed. Like, people actually sharing how they feel. Like, you weren't supposed to do that. That's right. Right? Like, and I didn't know what to do. And then when I found out that there were things that can help me ease some of that pain, that's when I jumped into it. Because I thought that I was just doing some normal things because I didn't understand the depths of why I was doing it. And that's what I would ask. Like, if somebody said exactly like you said, like, I'm 17 years old, I'm doing what normal kids do. Well, are you? Like, I thought I was too, and I wasn't. And that's kind of one of the big reasons why I like sharing my story with people, is because I don't want folks to have to go through what I did. It's not fun, man. Yeah. And mental health is a real thing. Didn't know it until I got sober, and actually till I started to go see some really good professional people to help me with that. But yeah, man, it was just a whole bunch of anxiety and depression and failure and insecurities that just took me to a spot where, wow, I took half a sip of that or had half of that bottle, and all of that stuff went away. But the crazy thing is when I woke up that next day, it was the same thing. That's right. It was the same thing. Like, that hole in my soul, man, like, it was still empty. Yeah. And then I had to start filling it with more stuff. Yeah. I mean, it cracks me up when we look at the very beginning of Scripture, and we see Adam and Eve, and the fall of man happens, and the first thing they do is avoid.
It's like innately inside of us. It's like if something feels bad, I just want to avoid it. And that's so much of what addiction is the avoidance of our reality. And I see it too with kids that are struggling, not even kids, adults too, with video games. It's like an alternate reality. And so much of our physiology and psychology is so wrapped up in avoidance of anything that could cause us pain. And I think a lot of times what God asks us to do is actually sit in the pain and allow us to heal and sit with it and experience it. But addiction's so much a part of avoidance, isn't it?
It is. And again, it's like a cultural thing, right? Like anytime you look at something, alcohol specifically, right? It's always glamorous, right?
Yeah.
And we have this way people want us to think from a worldly perspective that is not biblical.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you said it, like God never told me, Jesus never told me, the baddest dude on the planet, that it was going to be easy for me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and when I would get wrapped up in myself and those avoidance things you're talking about, you know, the woes are me that we talk about in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? Like, I didn't want to deal with that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It was just easier to go get a bottle, right? It was easier to just go and do what I was going to do, whether it was alcohol and drugs or women or money, you know, and it's not the easier, softer way.
Yeah.
The way to do things is to figure who you are out as a person, and then find Christ, man. Like, I've tried every avenue, Matt. Like, again, I wasn't a believer. I mean, I believed in God, right? I think everybody has a concept of what that is.
Sure.
But I never knew who he was or what he can do. And it's amazing if you allow him in, right? And if you share with him, like you said, like, you don't avoid it.
Yeah.
You know, you don't block it out, because eventually, at least for me, it came to light.
Yeah.
And now I'm sitting here with my boy, you know, Matt, talking about my journey.
Yeah.
And again, it wasn't easy, you know, because there was a ton of avoidance, dude. It was an everyday occurrence. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. We won't spend a lot of time on it, but I want to say, you know, a lot of our listeners know I was a touring musician for a long time, and I lived in Nashville, and I had moved back to Ohio somewhere around 2010, and friends of mine had signed me up for a karaoke contest, and I went to do this karaoke contest. I hadn't seen you in years.
Yeah, man.
And it just so happened that was where you were hanging that night.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw a side of you that I don't know that I've ever seen before. And you know, I think you were using that night and all kinds of things. I think it was not long after that. I think you had actually decided to get sober.
Yep.
But I remember, I'll never forget this, Ralph. I remember being there that night. My parents were there, and just going, you know, I had lost a lot of friends on the road from addiction, overdose, suicide. And I had that feeling that night. And it was like, I saw you get at the end of the night, you were leaving and you were getting in a car. And I'm like, that's probably it. That's probably the last time I'm going to see my brother Ralph. And it broke my heart. And then fast forward, I don't know, 4 or 5 years later, my wife and I are trying to find a church. And we decided we wanted to check out a local church called Redemption in our community. And we pull up, and I'm walking towards the door, and you're standing there greeting at this church. And I'm looking at my wife going, get in the car. This is not the church. We don't want to go to this church. This guy's crazy. Like, I thought he'd be dead, you know, in a gutter somewhere on the side of the road somewhere. And here he's greeting. Tell me, how in the world do you get from that night where I was singing at a karaoke place to greeting at a church?
God's grace, bro. I know that's the Christian answer. All right.
Yeah.
But dude, that's it. You know, that night, I'm glad it didn't go the way you thought it was going to go.
Me too.
Because it should have multiple times over, man.
Yeah.
And, you know, the one thing I remember is just knocking stuff over and spilling stuff on your dad. And I thought I was living life, dude. Like,
Yeah.
I thought in that moment, like, I had arrived, right?
Yeah.
And if I would have stopped there, I would have missed so much. You know, so you come into church, and, you know, Redemption, that's where I learned how to love Jesus. Mm-hmm. And that's why I love our church so much, because it's not about the same thing I thought it was when I was in grade school, right? You know, when I walked into those doors, the first thing that really drew me into it, I had a guy named Paul who helps me, and he was sponsoring me in the rooms, and he had said, the only way you're going to understand true recovery is if you meet Jesus, if you meet God. Like, you've got to have that in your life. And if you know anything about Alcoholics Anonymous, they talk about a power greater than yourself, but God is mentioned a bazillion times in that book, because that's what it's about.
That's right.
There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's about him. And he brought me in there, man. And, we kind of worship ninja'd it for a while. But then eventually, like...
Wait, hold on. You worship ninja'd it? You're going to have to...
Yes. Yeah.
What does that mean?
So ask Rick, man, right? Like, Pastor Rick, love that dude. Love all our pastors, Austin, Jared. But, we would go in right before service started, right? And then right as service was leaving, before the lights were on, we were bailing.
You're out.
Like, we didn't want any of the fellowship. We didn't want to know anything that you had. Like, I was there just to kind of check the box.
Yeah.
Right? And the crazy thing is that it was like the first year and a half of my recovery, I still felt like a bag of bees. And I didn't know what it was. And I tried to use the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. There were some really awesome, crotchety old dudes that God put in my path that kind of supported me and helped me. And I didn't want to let those guys down, but it never worked. And until I wanted that relationship, and again, I don't even know if I wanted it. I think he just, like he did in March of 13, said, all right, man, like, you're here, enough's enough, right? And for me, it was just a moment. I walked into our old big room, and the band was playing, and it felt like nobody was in the church. It was like I was walking in there by myself, and I had one of those, again, moments of clarity with God. And there was a theme, and I don't remember exactly how it went, but it was, why not me? And I'm like, yep, like, this is what he needs me to do. And I caught fire and started getting involved with the church, and started, greeting and doing donut duty. And I was teaching a Bible, Corinthians, I think it was, or Galatians or something, to these 5th and 6th graders. Like, it's like, let's go, man.
Right.
Because I allowed him into my heart, man. Because that was the final piece that I was missing.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I finally allowed him in, and he filled that hole in my soul. And man, I don't want, like, I'm not perfect, right? Like, I'm a busted up, broken up knucklehead most of the time, but I know what the answer is today. And it's him. And that's why it was his grace. Like, that's it. Like, if he didn't do what he just did on Easter weekend, I probably would be dead, man.
I have no doubt.
Right? Like, I was going down that path, and it wasn't going to stop until that moment of clarity in March of 13, him putting people in my path, then me allowing Jesus into my life, and then just saying, all right, man, let's roll. You know what I mean?
So it has been, 9 years.
9 years, bro.
Of sobriety.
Who would have thunk it?
That's amazing, dude.
Dude. Like, if you would have told me when we were seniors in high school that we'd be doing this right now, and I'm telling you about Jesus and not about trying to drink some bourbon or do some other really illegal things,
right,
I'd have laughed at you.
Yeah.
From Schmitty's van to podcasts in your basement, bro.
Right. Yeah. It is crazy, and I think it's unbelievable. And there's a few people in my life that I've shared this story with, that, if I were to take a picture of some of the people I graduated, and you knew me then. It's like I was involved in Young Life, grew up in a Christian home. There were a couple guys I'd be like, that dude's never going to meet Jesus. And you would have been at the top of that list.
Like 1 or 2 or 3. Like, how would you have ranked me?
You would have been definitely 1, maybe 2. But it's true. But it's like, it's amazing. And the thing is, it's been amazing to see your transformation. Just knowing you, gosh, that's 20 some plus odd years, and seeing who you become. Talk to me a little bit about what. So let me rewind. I got to see you speak last weekend. You spoke at our church. Dr. Blankenship led who is our clinical director at Emerge, led a talk on understanding addiction. And then we opened it up and brought you up on stage, and there was a Q&A. And I just got to see a little bit different of a side of you, because I don't go to AA and see you sit in the rooms with these guys and these women, and I don't see that side that talks about the journey of sobriety. And I was sitting in the audience watching you speak, just going, dude, this guy is bringing it right now. Talk to me a little bit about the journey and the encouragement that you were bringing to people about sobriety and what that means.
So it's funny. I just came from a meeting before I came over, and the topic that we were talking about was helping others. Mm-hmm. So I was probably 8 or 10 months sober, and again, there have been some cornerstones of people in my recovery, and I asked these guys, like, man, how am I going to pay this back? Mm-hmm. Like, I finally feel like I have a life again, and I was just 8-10 months sober, right? Like, I had way much more to learn, had much more to grow. Like, I haven't even met Jesus yet. Like, it was a ton of other things that were going to continue to happen. And the one guy, my sponsor's name's Rich, he said, you know what, kid, you just got to give this thing away. Mm-hmm. And I held on to that because, like I told you, like, he has blessed me with some abilities. I'm pretty relatable. I can talk to anybody, mm-hmm. you know, and I love being able to engage with people and to have them hear something that makes sense to them mm-hmm. on a very simple level, and then to watch them get it. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is, I want to make sure that people know, regardless of where they're at in their life and in their journey, there's always hope. Mm-hmm. And that's what those guys gave me. So all I'm trying to do, in a little bit different presentation, right, is give people hope, man. And what we did last week, or last Sunday, 2 Sundays ago now, was awesome. Yeah. Because when you think of addiction, dude, like, you don't think of me, mm-hmm. right? You saw it, right? But right. if you would see me on the street right now, right, you're going to tell me I'm a drug addict and an alcoholic? Right. There ain't no way. I got a great job. I'm cute, like super cute, right? Like, you're
modest,
dude. Absolutely, super humble. But you're not going to say that guy right there right. is a drug addict and an alcoholic, because of what my perception was. Yeah. Was that dude you saw under the bridge, right?
That's right.
And that's not it. So when our church does things like that, I want to be transparent, open, and honest to make sure that people understand that this stuff is real. Yeah. That you do recover, mm-hmm. right? And there are other people out there that will walk this journey with you. Yeah. And it's not just a bunch of dried up, you know, cult worshiping knuckleheads. It's a knucklehead right. who figured this thing out because of God's grace and wants to give you the same opportunity.
Yeah. So, Ralph, a lot of our listeners are pastors, church leaders. Talk to me a little bit about the journey that our church took in embracing a whole community of people that is such a huge foundation of our body, which is addicts. Talk to me a little bit. I feel like there was an explosion a couple of years ago that we just opened the doors, and it's been a floodgate, and it's been amazing. Talk to me a little bit about that journey.
So it's one of our ministries, right? Like, it's one of 2 that we really focus on. But for me, Matt, like I said, like, early on, even when I walked into that building as a worship ninja, it was nothing like I've ever felt before. Mm-hmm. I knew church as sit, stand, kneel. You know, you put a bunch of smelly stuff in a bronze whatever, and you spray it around the church, and you got some dude up there with a huge mole on his face. Mm-hmm. He's telling you how God is gonna, you know, discipline you if you don't do what you're told, right? You're mm-hmm. going to hell if you don't. Mm-hmm. And when I walked in there in a Browns jersey, a backwards hat, and some baggy sweatpants, I didn't feel different. Mm-hmm. I felt accepted from the moment I walked in that building, you know, and I felt like that every time I went in there. And then when we got a little bit more comfortable and when I had that moment, it's like, again, we caught fire. Like, it just, everybody gravitated. Mm-hmm. And I started feeling comfortable talking to the pastors. And again, they were very open. Mm-hmm. They didn't, you know, give me the Heisman and say, hey, man, we ain't got time for you. You don't wear right clothes, and you talk funny, and, you know, we don't want to know your story. They wanted to know. Yeah. You know, and then what happens is, again, what I'm supposed to do is go tell people about it. Right? And you don't have to be a drug addict or an alcoholic to do that. I mean, we're called to disciple, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I'm supposed to tell somebody about Jesus. And if you go into rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, it's kind of it's a sensitive subject. Not for this guy, right? Like, I don't care. Right. Like, I'm going to go tell you who saved my life. Yeah. The baddest dude that's ever walked the planet. He said, hey, man, this is what we need to do. Got it. So let me go help. Let me be the vessel of that message. So we started to tell people. And then all of a sudden, a few years ago, it's actually, I think it's going to go on 4 years this year, Matt, that we started an AA meeting there. You know, when Jared came up, he had talked to Rick before and said, hey, like, we want to do something. What should we do? And we're like, well, let's start a meeting. Yeah. You know, and we started a meeting, and I took what my sponsor did when he started a meeting, and I had 10 people that committed to a year of going there. And, you know, it just expanded. We're doing FFA, right? We had an addiction night to talk about like what addiction really is. It's not some thing that you don't want to talk about, like bring it to light.
Yeah.
You know, and the reason we talk about Jesus is because that's our solution. Mm-hmm. You know, and that's the great thing about what our church, like I go to that meeting, and I'm not worried about talking about it because of obviously where we're at, but it's because that's our story. Mm-hmm. And then to watch other people come into church on Sunday, you know, and praise Jesus like we do.
Yeah.
Man, like we didn't have the backing of our pastors in our church, and we didn't have guys like you that, you know, want to help people. Like none of this would happen. Mm-hmm. And it's just awesome to watch God's hand work through all of it. Mm-hmm. And again, but for the biggest thing for me, dude, like it was just, I didn't feel judged, man. Like I didn't feel because, you know, I was a drug addict and an alcoholic that somebody was going to look at me funny. Mm-hmm. And honestly, the cool thing was is if people did, like I had people that loved me that looked at me and said, don't worry about them.
That's right.
You're the one that's going to go ahead and display what redemption looks like.
Yeah. And
how awesome that's what our church is called.
If you had the opportunity, which you do, because you have a microphone, and this is going to go out to whoever's listening. If you had the opportunity to get into the ear of somebody that's listening right now that is on the fence about sobriety, there's something that maybe God's pulling on their hearts right now, saying, you know what, I think I might be struggling. I think a lot of times it's just getting to the point of just admitting, but talk maybe to that person who might be listening that maybe just needs a little bit of motivation.
Well, here's what I'll tell you, because this is what these old guys told me, and I'm pretty straight shooter when it comes to recovery because it's serious business, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're having that conversation with yourself right now as you're listening to this, you probably should show up to a meeting on Thursday night at Redemption Chapel. Mm-hmm. That's my first sign, right? Like if you're having that thought, like I'm not going to put Matt on the spot, but I'm going to put Matt on the spot. Like I don't think Matt has that thought.
No.
Right? I don't think Matt sits here and thinks, man, like, I don't know if I can not drink tonight, or I don't know if I'm going to be able to go a whole week without thinking about alcohol.
Correct.
You're having that thought, there's something there.
Right.
And maybe to your point, God is pulling on your heartstrings a little bit to allow you to see that.
Yeah.
And then you got to ask for help. And that's the hardest thing that it was for me to do, because at the lowest point in my life, I didn't think there was any help to be had.
Yeah.
Right? Because I just was so broken and so beat down. I didn't think anybody cared about me. I thought I'd be better if I wasn't around, which how selfish is that of me to think, right? But you have to want to be able to ask for that help, knowing that you don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And it's okay. Like, dude, like if you, again, would have told me that I'd be sitting here talking about sobriety and my relationship with Jesus, I would have told you you're insane.
Yeah.
But I had those moments. And I had to do some work, man. Like, it's just not like he's not a genie, right? Like, you got to do some stuff.
Right.
Like, the first thing for me, I had to quit drinking and using all those drugs. Like, I couldn't.
Step one,
bro. Like, I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
You know? But if you're sitting there thinking that, man, maybe I do have a problem, you know, not to be a jerk, but you probably do.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't make sense for me to have a drink.
Right.
Like, I never even talk about that. Like, I want to have a couple. Because glass of bourbon for what? That's dumb. And why are you going to spend $300 on a bottle anyway?
Right.
Go to Circle K and grab 4 bottles.
Right.
For like $20. Right? But if you're thinking that, it's okay that you need help to get you over the hump to find that relationship with Christ, because you're not alone. Mm-hmm. There are millions of people that think the exact same thing you do. And you talk about people that you knew on the road that have died. I've got tattoos on my arm of people that I've met in my journey that are dead. Mm-hmm. And we don't need anybody dying, man.
Right.
Like this thing is no joke. You know, you're not going to be ashamed. You might be, but we're not going to shame you.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
And there's so many resources, especially at our church. I mean, we've got counselors, we've got meetings, we've got FFA. Like, there's a ton of stuff that we want to help you with.
Just in case listeners don't explain what FFA is, I think that's an important thing.
Yeah, it's families facing addiction. And we've got some really, really solid people that initiate that part of our recovery ministry for family members who deal with people that are addicts or alcoholics. You know, because that's the other thing too. Like, my family loved me like crazy. I had friends that loved me like crazy, you know, that tried to say, hey, man, like, I don't want this to be the last time I see you.
Right.
You know, because at the end of the day, I thought I was a pretty decent dude.
Yeah.
But I wasn't.
Right.
You know, and people that deal with addicts or alcoholics need to understand how to help them the proper way. And I think that's what the great thing that FFA does. And there's also another program called Al-Anon. But for our church, FFA is where it is. It's faith-based, you know, and again, you're not alone in that aspect either. Moms, dads, brothers, sisters, friends, boyfriends, girlfriends, husband, wives, go to those meetings to have the support they need to handle the person who they love who's got a drinking or a drug problem.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing to watch how that works too in people's lives.
Yeah. I think when I was watching you speak church a week and a half ago or whatever it was, and you were like, you know what, just take a risk and go to a meeting. Mm-hmm. Like, what's it going to hurt? If you're listening, right, if you're that guy right now, if you're that woman right now, if you're that kid right now listening and you're going, you know what, I think I might have a problem. I love the fact that you said if that seed has been planted in your head, you need to investigate it.
Yeah. And what's it hurt? What do you got to lose? That it might work, it might help you. And that's the beauty of what our meeting is. When we had the heart to start that, when they came and said, hey, let's talk about starting an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, everyone in that group that sat and had that conversation had one thing in mind. We wanted to help you, period. I don't care if it's drinking, if it's drugs, if it's money, if it's porn. We had a kid, he came last Thursday, 18 years old, man, had an issue with pornography. But he came to our meeting. Yeah. And that's nothing we did. That's all God, right? Mm-hmm. Because of our heart for what we just want to love on people, man, because that's the thing. That's the key to it all. At least the people that I've talked to. I've gone to detoxes for years and talked to people, right? I've tried to help and minister to people that are struggling. The one thing is, or there's a couple things. One is fear, right? Everybody's just afraid. And what I mean, I'm not talking about spiders or bees like in the movie The Replacements, right? We're talking about quicksand.
That's right.
Right? Like you're going to a spot and you just don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. And don't tell anybody, right? No, man. Like, we want to love you until you can start loving yourself again. And we're going to show you the ultimate solution. Whether you believe that or not, when you walk in there, we're going to take you to that spot. And then it's amazing what he can do if you let him, mm-hmm. right? But again, like, you have to understand that if you're having that thought, right, if you're understanding or you think that you might have an issue, it's probably there, man. It's probably there.
Mm-hmm. Man, I'll tell you what, it's been amazing, you and I being able to reconnect on this level. Like, over the last, I don't know, at least 7 some years, you and I have developed a completely new and different relationship. And there's nothing that brings me more joy than a Sunday morning. Either I'm playing on the worship team or I'm worshiping in our congregation and looking over and seeing Ralph with his hands up in the air and just going after it during worship and just praising the Lord. It's mind blowing to me because of the history mm-hmm. that we have. And it's just, you and myself and another one of my buddies who's probably on that list, Aaron Zainal. I hope it's okay. I use his name, but I love him to death. I mean, you and I, we all go to dinner like once a month. And the fact that I'm sitting there with the two of you guys and we're all talking about Jesus and talking about, our transformational stories. I'm sitting there and I'm like, it's surreal, dude. It's surreal.
Because if you look at where we were, right? Yeah. Even when you started your journey and during all the touring, and by the way, my homeboy he can rip the guitar, by the way. So if you want to come to our church just cause, cheap plug, come watch my boy when he's up there because he gets after it. And I try to get him a little bit more juiced up when I'm out there too. That's part of it. But like, who would have thunk it, man? Like, it's because of what he can do. That's right. It's not me and you.
Right.
This was already played out, man. Like, this was already built in when we first met each other back in high school.
Yeah.
And, he gives us that option of choice. I made a lot of bad choices.
Yeah.
Like, I wasn't a product of my environment. I mean, hello, they don't think it happens in Hudson, but it does, right? But, like, he decided after I wanted to choose, because I had to choose, right, that I wanted that relationship with him, that this is where we are. Mm-hmm. And it's a beautiful thing, man. And the reason I get so amped up for worship, and again, especially when my boy's up there, is because, man, if that's the least I can do for this guy, mm-hmm. Are you kidding me? Like, I'm gonna get crazy. Like, I'm gonna get lit. Like, it's gonna happen.
Just a different kind of lit.
Just a different kind of lit, right? Like, because it's pure enjoyment and excitement, and I'm in awe. Like you said, it's surreal when you grasp what he's done in my life.
Yeah.
It's just unbelievable. It's unbelievable to me until I look at him and say, well, yeah, nothing's unbelievable when it comes to that dude.
Yeah.
You know? And I want somebody to see me with my backwards hat on again, tatted up like crazy, right? My crazy shoes on, my shoe game's fire. But to say, wow, like, what's going on with that guy?
Yeah.
And not because I want the attention. It's because I want them to come ask me what's up with that guy.
Yeah.
And what's up with that guy is he found the answer to his problem.
Yeah.
And it lies in Christ.
Yeah.
And that's the simplest answer I can give everybody. And if you don't believe that, okay. And again, I'm not the judge and jury anymore, which is really great because I used to be the judge and jury of everybody, especially like guys like Matt who, you know, going to church every Sunday and whatever. But
right.
like, that's the reality of the situation we're in, is if you allow him into your life, you know, and if you allow him to influence your decisions, because he will,
mm-hmm.
and we might not like it, and we might not like the answer he gives, but if we follow his lead, like, this is what happens. And I get to sit and have a great conversation with my high school buddy, and we get to go to dinners, and because there's so many blessings in sobriety, like the one blessing, and I'm probably way off script, but like Matt has a daughter,
mm-hmm.
and when I get to see her, it fills my heart with so much joy
mm-hmm.
because she looks at me like I'm a superhero.
And she thinks you are.
Right? And there's so many other people who have given me blessings that, because the two older kids I told you about, like, they don't speak to me that much. And it's amazing, though. My oldest boy kind of did. We started texting a little bit back and forth last week. But, like, my daughter, like, I don't talk to her. I haven't talked to her since 2013. But he puts things in my path that allow me to have relationships,
mm-hmm.
right? With Matt's daughter and the Pettit's kids and the Larlam kids, like, and every kid that I get to go get crazy with at Kid Zone now.
Yeah.
Like, he's so amazing.
Yeah.
You know, he's just an amazing God, dude.
One of my favorite things about Scripture is the moment we realize that these guys we call disciples, who for all intents and purposes were the biggest bumbling group of idiots, but there's a moment where we can see that they're then becoming the pillar of the foundation that we built the church on. And we see when the Holy Spirit takes over and these guys become something way beyond that we can ever imagine. I see that in you, you know? I see a kid that in high school was a bumbling idiot, you know?
Like multiple times.
And now, man, it's just, it blows my mind to see. And the only kind of transformation like that is when God takes somebody and just reworks it and redoes it. And it's nothing that we can try to do. It's something we have to just accept.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And one of the things, you know, I take a lot of things personal,
mm-hmm.
right? Because again, I know the answer to the test. And, you know, I want to help as many people as I possibly can because, again, I know that's what he needs me to do. I know my purpose in life today, bro. Like, it's not about working where I work. It's not about anything else except two things. It's telling somebody about Jesus today and then trying to help somebody in recovery. So when I'm at work or when I'm in the rooms or I'm talking to a buddy who's struggling with something and they just don't get it, right? Like, I look at myself and say, like, well, what did I do? I should have said something differently, you know? But what I've been taught over the years, and this is kind of where you're going, at least I think, is I'm not going to change anybody.
That's right.
There's no worldly power. There's no worldly whatever that's going to change somebody. The only person, the only being that can change anybody's heart, just like he did with those dudes you were just talking about,
mm-hmm.
was the guy that rolled with him for 3 years, right?
Right.
He's the only one that can change your heart. The only one. And again, don't believe me. That's fine. I'm telling you.
Right.
I've had a transformation, and I'm not afraid to share it, right? Like, people like Matt see it probably more than I do,
mm-hmm.
right? But I know that something changed, and the only thing that really changed in my life, because I'm still kind of a bumbling idiot, like, is that I've allowed Christ into my heart.
Yeah.
And that dude said, "Hey, man, I've got bigger plans for you, bro," and I'm following that lead, and I still screw up, man. Like, we don't have enough time, dude, like, to tell you how many times I've screwed up in sobriety, but like, that's the key component to all of it. He will change your heart.
Right.
You know, talking about growing up again a little bit, like, I always was told that you could never change, dude. You are who you are, right? That's just what it is,
mm-hmm.
you know, and that's who you're going to be, and you just have to embrace it. That's a load of crap.
Right.
Because there is the Almighty, there is that alpha dog, who, if you allow him into your life, can change your heart and the way you view things.
Right.
Because I view things differently. You know, we had a brief conversation about some of that stuff upstairs, right? Like,
right.
I don't view the things that I used to view the same. And it's not because I don't want to. It's because he said, man, like, look, that's not important. Like, I'm important. Yeah. Go tell somebody about me. That's important. Because, again, he's blessed me with certain things, man. I get an opportunity to disciple high school kids. Because, again, I am a little animated and a little much sometimes, right? Not just at worship service, right? Like, and they connect with me.
That's right.
And they understand it. And, again, I'm real with them, and I probably use some language that their parents wouldn't like that I use, but it just works, right?
Yeah.
It just works.
My friend, it is awesome to have these kind of conversations.
Yeah,
and you know, maybe we'll see if there might be something down the road that maybe you and I do a little series or something. We'll see. I know you and I have kind of been talking about some stuff, so
that'd be pretty fun.
We'll throw some out there. Anything else you'd like to share with the audience before we end our time today?
No, the one thing that kind of is stuck with me since we've been talking is just, you know, if you're on the fence, right? Like, I was on the fence for a long time, even though I knew I had a problem. Like, there's hope. Mm-hmm. There's so much hope out there for you. There's people that love you right now. One of them is me. So if you're listening and you're struggling and you don't think anybody cares about you, you can take that and throw it outside, because I do. Mm-hmm. And I can speak for Matt too, and I guarantee he loves you too. Mm-hmm. And if you want the help and you're seeking something better for yourself, just reach out. Because, again, if you're sitting on that fence, there's probably something there.
Yep.
And what recovery and what Christ ultimately has done and changed in my life, I want that for everybody. Yeah. You know, this is I don't know how I lived my life without Jesus for 35 years, Matt. Mm-hmm. I don't. And, you know, it's just an amazing experience. And, again, the beauty of it all is you don't have to be perfect, because he's the one that's perfect. Yeah. And he loves you so much, and he will bring you back if you want it. And it's just a beautiful thing. And, you know, I appreciate you even asking, dude. Like I said, it's just mind-blowing to me that we're sitting here doing this thing, because that's not what I had in the cards either. Yeah. You know, but I'm proud of you, man. I'm just glad you let me pour into your family and your wife and your soon-to-be baby, hopefully. Right? Like, do I get to hold the baby when they come? And your daughter, who is absolutely a joy. Like, and again, I never would have any of that stuff.
Right.
You know, I never would have any of that stuff. And how much would we have missed out on? And, you know, our friendship has grown, man. I love you like a brother. And you've helped me more than you probably know. And just thanks for having me on, brother. Yeah. Well, my daughter always refers to you as Uncle Ralph. So, I mean, baby. That's family right there. But I'll end with saying this, is that the idea of being on the fence, my guess is if you're on the fence, you've already tried one side of it a bunch of times and you've gotten the same result. Maybe this is the time to try the other side of the fence. And so I'll just leave you with that. And, man, God bless you, man. Love you. Love you too, man. Well, thanks, Ralph, for your story, your journey, and your passion. It truly is amazing, his testimony of transformation. I hope this has been a blessing to you. It's not perfect, but man, it's amazing progress. If you're struggling with addiction of any kind, reach out. Reach out to someone. Do it now. Don't let another day go by. If you want any information on Emerge Ministries, please check out emerge.org. And notice also that we are currently hiring. And we are looking for mental health therapists that want to incorporate their faith into their therapy. Find all that info on the website as well. Please give us a thumbs up or a like or a comment if you like what we're doing. Well, until next time, or when our Savior comes, God bless.